All right, welcome to Be the Market Expert. And so, guys, I think that as we're looking at this thing, this is what we have to keep in mind. This thing's about to open up, and I think it's getting exciting, right? I mean, as we're going through and we're doing the right activities and we're having as many conversations as possible, we are staying as educated as possible, and the magic is about to happen. And so, here's the first one. It says rate cut grows more likely as inflation holds steady. So we've been watching this, right? We've been looking at this week over week, and there's a new article about something going on with the Fed. And here we are. So it goes through, and as we're looking at this thing, it says overall prices did rise 2.7% last month compared to a year earlier, the same annual increase seen in June, according to the Labor Department of the CPI, right? Your Consumer Price Index. And it says the headline number was slightly below what economists had expected, bolstering the case for a Fed Chair Jerome Powell and other policy makers to cut rates in September. So here we are, guys. Like, as we're looking at this thing, this is where we are hovering. It says overall prices rose 2.7% last month compared to a year earlier, the same annual increase, right? We just kind of looked over this, and this is where we are. So as we're looking at this, we have to keep in mind two things. The Fed has gone through and their stance has been two-part. One, do we have enough people with jobs? Yes, we do. Right. And the second part is they're looking at inflation data. And it looks like everything is staying pretty steady, even with the tariffs. Remember, we started this year with this presidential election and the tariffs coming off strong. And there was a lot of speculation that prices were going to blow up. I remember us looking at articles on this call where they were talking about an iPhone that was going to cost like $10,000. And we did the poll, right? We said, raise your hand if you were going to go buy a $10,000 iPhone. And nobody was like, well, Charles, I mean, I always wait in the line for that iPhone and I'm going to go get it. I don't care how much it costs. And that's exactly what we're seeing, right? We're seeing, yeah, things that are going up in price. You're going to be saying, like, do I want this, or can I pass? Or is there another product that is cheaper, that is comparable? Just like housing, right? We talk about the principle of substitution, right? To where if we're looking at apples to apples, of course, we're going to choose the cheapest apple, right? So as we're looking at this, guys, what we should be thinking about now, rates for all intensive purposes, all signs point to we're going to see a drop. We're going to see a decrease. And so, what are we doing? What are we currently doing to make sure that we are staying in relationship? Guys, this is the deal. All we have to do is stay in emotional proximity to people as they're thinking about transacting business. So they think about us. That's it, right? Like, it's simple, right? It's simple, not easy, because I get it. We get to the point where I don't want to be a salesperson. I don't want them to think that all I care about is making a sale. But here's the deal. Like, what other ways can we reach out to them? It says inflation's still hot, but few tariff impacts so far. Like, we haven't seen this. And with China, we keep seeing them kicking the can down the street with China, right? Like another 90-day extension, another 90-day extension, another night, right? Like, and so I think that enough countries have kind of fallen in line of what we have seen, and we've seen these big producers coming back to the United States, or at least sending some kind of portion of revenue back to the United States. Like, we're seeing all these different things that are happening to make sure that we are putting money back into the US. And I don't see a reason for the Fed to keep the rates locked where they are keeping it locked. It says this, it says the July inflation data showed that while inflation remains stubbornly high, higher than the Fed's 2% target, right? We go through and says the tariff-driven spikes that many had anticipated have yet to materialize. It says in part that this may be due to Trump's frequently revisions and delays, right? Mostly with China. We keep seeing this. It says on a monthly basis, overall prices rose 0.2% in July from June, the same rate seen in the prior months. Right? It says excluding volatile food and energy prices, so-called core inflation rose 0.3% on the month. And so we're looking at this thing and it says, here's what it did. It jumped 3% on an annual basis. And while we look at this, It says, meanwhile, the housing costs continue to rise with shelter inflation up 3.6% annually. Costs for homeowners rose 4.1%, and home insurance prices jumped 5.8. 5.8%. Like, as we're looking at this, guys, that had nothing to do with tariffs. That has everything to do with the fires out in California, the flooding out on the East Coast, the hail that we see in Colorado. Like, has nothing to do with tariff data. The cost for homeowners, right, as we look at this thing, or shelter. Oh, we see shelter, and we're going to look at something else, and they have an interesting take on what they actually think is going to happen with the rental market here very soon, and it has to do with immigration. But as we're looking at this, none of this is really driving towards tariffs. It says, for the overall inflation figure, falling energy prices helped offset rising food costs. Overall grocery bills increased 2.2% annually, right? And we think about like eggs and chickens and everything else that went on, with the major increases seen in beef, eggs, and coffee. And guys, we've lived this, right? Like, the egg situation has nothing to do with tariffs again, right? The egg situation has everything to do with the bird flu and a bunch of birds being executed, right? And so as we're looking at this thing, beef, eggs, coffee, this is what's bringing it up. Yes, the coffee is probably more tariff driven. Yeah, I'll give you that one, right? I will give you coffee's probably tariff driven because it is being imported into the United States and there's tariffs, and so they're raising the cost. And that's kind of what we're seeing. But let's shift this. I think this is actually some pretty cool news. It says HUD breaks down barriers to home ownership. Now, as we're looking at this thing, let's jump into it a little bit. So what we are going to see, it says the HUD secretary shares how new policies simplify the process, reduce financing costs, and strengthen the housing market for a more effective FHA insured lending process. So when we look at this, and we were to just look at the overall makeup of lending products out there, FHA makes up a very sizable portion of loans that are going through. And let's look at some of the things that they're doing. So firstly, they're going to streamline the appraisal process, right? And they talk about unnecessary appraisal protocols. And it says, historically, borrowers and industry stakeholders view FHA appraisals as more complicated, costly, and inefficient compared to the conventional appraisal. And we've lived this, right? We think of like VA being pretty rough, right? Even as in the industry, VA is pretty rough. FHA is also not fun. Conventional, pretty simple. And so what they're going to do is they're going to go through and they're going to align the appraisal process more so with the conventional side of things. They're also going to go through and they're going to start investing more in technology. And I think we're going to see this more and more. And honestly, guys, I think this is actually a product of the appraisal industry. It says FHA continues to build off IT initiatives that began during the first administration when Trump was in office. And it says investing in FHA Catalyst platform to improve our collateral valuation analytics. They have to do this. And I want you guys to think about what the appraisal world looks like today. If you want to become an appraiser, you have to go and you have to intern. So you actually have to go find an appraiser that is going to allow you to ride along with them and to do some work with them. And they have a very, very scarcity mindset. They do not come from a place of abundance, because what has happened is they're afraid that if more people enter into this, there's going to be less of the pie for them. So they've pretty much put the barriers to entry really high. No one's really going through and doing anything and allowing people to come into this industry. And so what we're probably going to see is this is really a dying breed. I actually think that when we think about AI and what AI is going to replace, AI is going to replace the appraisal industry. And so the fact that FHA is saying, hey, we're going to be investing in some tech that is going to streamline these processes, I think that's going to be industry wide. And so I think all of them are really looking into this right now. The underwriting requirements, full-time direct endorsement underwriting requirements. They are going to repeal this. And so, guys, when we look at this, what this is where they go through and they want to make sure that your client has been X amount of years in the industry or at the job and that they're full time. And they're saying this, like, if they can afford it, they can afford it, right? We don't need to go through and put limitations on how long they've been in the business so they can qualify. They're getting rid of this. This is pretty cool, right? So as we're going in, they're just going to look, they're going to say, can this person afford it? Do they have a stable job? They're going to have the conversations, they're going to move forward. They're not going to put limitations on, hey, have you been in this role for 3 years? And if not, have you at least been in the industry for X? Like, they're going to get rid of that. They're going to go in and they're going to reduce the paperwork. And so right now, inside of the FHA side, there is more forms where they go through and they are looking at collecting data. Like, that's all it is. They're going through and they are making sure that the people are very, very educated and that they understand what's going on with their loan. And while I don't think anyone disagrees that that's not important, but we've actually looked in the past, right? We looked at last week where we saw people actually start the process and they gave up because of how complicated it was, right? We looked at this article last week on this call where we saw Gen Z buyers that were going online, they were starting the process and they were abandoning it because of how complicated it was. And so they're saying that with all this paperwork, they've actually only seen like 1.2% of borrowers who actually completed the form actually saw any benefit. And so what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of all of these restrictions. That these rescissions will also particularly help your first-time home buyers, right? Gen Z again. They recognize that the average age of the first-time home buyer is too high. And we've seen this, right? Where we're looking at 38-year-olds. 38-year-olds is your demographic of first-time home buyers, and that is just not awesome. And so that is the majority of people that are getting into this, and they're looking at all these different things. Hey, can these people afford it? Right? Are we putting too many restrictions on the housing and failing the appraisal process for these people? And so they're going to knock down barriers. When we look at this as a loan product where you can put 3% down, or there's other products where you can actually get money back, and they're looking at how can we get to the American dream, right? Homeownership is still the American dream. The only issue that we're running into is we have an affordability issue, especially here in Colorado, right? We think about our average price point being $600,000. Couple that with 6.5%, 7% mortgage rates, plus all these other barriers. People can't go and purchase houses. It's not because they don't want to, it's that they can't. And it's not that they can't afford it. They can absolutely afford it. There's just all these other barriers that say, you know what, you're actually just not a qualified borrower, but yet they are. We just have these restrictions that have been put in place that says, yeah, you have this job, it's well paying, but yeah, we're not going to lend you money because you haven't been in the job that long, right? When we think about this, think about any of these job applications where they're entry-level job applications and they're like, you have to have 7 years of work experience. And you're like, what? Why in the world do I need 7 years of work experience for this? That's this. And so we're going to see these things kind of roll out. And again, we see interest rates start going down. We start seeing some of these requirements start fading. Guys, it's about to get fun again. So speaking of fun, percentage of homes for sale with a price cut. All right, so cool. Let's look at this, right? It says during the pandemic boom, only 11% of homes for sale in 2021 had a price cut. By June of 25, 25.6%. Now, this looks a little bit different than a lot of the other data that we look at. And yet I think it's still interesting because you guys lead the list. Congratulations, guys. This is not a list that we want to be one of the top ones on, but we are. And so what I think for a listing agent, yeah, it's not fun, especially if you have a condo. Right now, I think having a condo in this market is probably zero to no fun, especially if you have a client that is antsy. You're probably doing a weekly check-in and like having to hound down buyers agents to figure out what they thought about the property and what it's going to take to get their buyer to move on it. And they're just like, listen, there's 10,000 other houses for sale that are in this price range, and my buyer's not in a hurry. That's just where we are right now. But I think what's cool, right, when we start thinking about Fed dropping rates, we start thinking about the FHA side of things getting a little bit easier. And then we think of that we are in a market where home prices are coming down and there's a lot of inventory. Guys, make sure we're having conversations with our buyers. They're saying 36% of all homes, let's round up to 37, right? We're at 0.8, let's round up. 37% of all homes that hit the market in the Denver, Colorado area have taken a price cut. And what this looks like is that means that they may have come in unreasonable, or they came in and there's just so many options that match their home in their area that buyers are not jumping on it because it's not that screaming of a deal. And with the cost of money, they're like, you know what, let's wait, let's see what else comes online. This home obviously isn't going anywhere. And that's just the psyche, the mentality of the buyers right now. And so as we're going through and we're looking at this, guys, what we do know is, historically speaking, when interest rates go down, obviously things become more affordable. And when we have the affordability barrier being relieved, right, what we do is we see more buyers raise their hand and they start going forward. Guys, this is what we're running into. If you were paying attention to what's happening right now, we're seeing buyers go out and get pre-qualified, all of them, right? We're seeing a mass increase of buyers raising their hand to see what they qualify for. But yeah, what we're also seeing, I saw this stat the other day. I wish I could pull it up. I wish I was thinking about this beforehand, that the average buyer is actually living in their home for, I think, like 11 years right now. And so that number is higher than what it's been in the past. I think that number was 11 years. I'll get you guys that data a little bit later. But 11 years, we're seeing a shift in people actually finding their forever home. And we're having conversations with these buyers. These buyers are saying, I'm not jumping on it unless it checks all the boxes, because at the way the cost of money is, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to pay this amount of money per month, but I don't want to have to go through this process 5 years from now, 7 years from now, right? They're saying, I want to stay in place. We are seeing more people right now pop up and say, I'm looking for my forever home. And I don't know how many people on this call are like, I'm in my forever home, but I would say this is a very, very new concept. And so when we're looking at this, guys, and we're talking about money, the affordability becoming less of a barrier, we're looking at the FHA going through and removing some restrictions to their loan product. And you live in Colorado with the highest percentage of price cut percentages in the United States, your buyers are going to have so much opportunity, and it's now your chance to showcase it, right? I think of Banana Ball, right? We're going to be talking about Banana Ball a lot, I think. And we got to think about this cultural phenomenon, which is Banana Ball, right? Where they came into Denver over the weekend. They had over 100,000 attendees over the course of 2 days. Madhouse on selling the merchandise and the show. And I know more about Banana Ball than I've ever known in the past, outside of they were on social media. And all they talk about, their CEO, their founder, their owner of Banana Ball, the conversation is just, how can we break through the noise? How can we be different than the competition? How can we do something that people do not expect? And if you want to see something you don't expect, Google Man Nana's cheerleaders, and those are their cheerleaders. You're welcome. Just go through and look at it. Like, that's not what you expect for the cheerleading demographic to look like, and yet they're doing something different. And it's been 3 days of me talking about it now, and that is what we need to be doing for our people, taking massive mind share by doing stuff a little bit differently. All right. So this is interesting. At least I think it's interesting. International immigration surge post-pandemic now is slumping. And here's what it means for housing. It says the updated forecast by AEI expects the international migration in 2025 to be somewhere of 115,000 people coming into the United States, anywhere to a net negative migration of an outpour of 525,000 people. And guys, that's a huge swing, right? Like we're looking at this, that is a monstrous swing. So let's look at this thing. It says between 2021 and 2024, we saw a substantial upswing in net international migration. And we look at this, it says between 2024 and 2023, we saw 3.3 million more people in the United States, all right? Not entering into the United States, but in the United States, an upward trajectory of 3.3 million. They said 2.8 million of that was from people coming into the United States. This wasn't babies, right? This wasn't a bigger population of babies being born in the US. This was people moving in. So this is what's interesting. When we talk about housing inventory, and we think about all the inventory that we have on the market right now, we do not have enough inventory. And the reason why we don't have enough inventory is we have people pouring into the United States, whether it's people from another country or it's babies coming of age, getting married, having more babies of their own, and our population is just ever increasing, right? Because we don't have more inventory than we did back in 2019, right? We have less inventory in 2019 and significantly more people. So it goes through here and it says this updated forecast, right? We just looked at this. Well, here it is. It says, here's their forecast range for net migration in 2025. Guys, look at this. We had 1.7, I'm going to round up again. There's 2.3, there's 2.8 million people coming from other countries into the United States. And this is just year after year after year. And this is their high forecast. They said, if anything, this year we're going to see 115,000 people migrate into the United States and stay, net migration positive. So when we're looking at this, they said that this is the lowest number it's been since the 1960s. But here's the deal. All of these people have already entered in, right? Like these people are already in the United States. And so now they're thinking, okay, we might see upwards of 115, or we might see 500,000 exit, right? We don't know what we're going to look at. We won't know anything because most data is rear view facing, right? We have to look in our rear view mirror to actually look back and see what this is. This isn't windshield data. This is rear view data. But they're saying like, this is what it could look like. All right. So this is the most positive that they would see, the most net positive. And this is the most net negative that they think that they could see. Well, if we look at this thing, they just talk about what's happening. They're saying that a lot of the migration is coming from the southern borders. Okay, so they're looking at the southern borders, but this is what I thought was actually interesting. Net US annual population change. This is natural increases, people having babies, right? People living in the United States having babies. And this is people coming into the United States. However they come in, they're coming in through a port, they're coming in through the southern border, they're flying in, right? Whatever that may look like. Well, here's where it's been, guys. Like we're looking at this thing and we're not having a lot of babies in the United States. And we're seeing this across the world. This is not a United States thing. If you want to see a worse chart, we can go find Japan. Japan's even in a worse situation, but yet they don't have this either. They don't have the immigration coming in, and they're not having babies. So they're in actually a real issue, and they're going to have some pretty disastrous stuff actually happening here as we go through. Well, when they're looking at this is what they're actually thinking. They're thinking that the rental demand will actually start getting lower and lower. But they're actually saying it is the lower population of cheaper rental is actually where they're going to say, right? They're saying the lower end of the market, the rental demand is actually going to start going down. So we actually might see an impact on that housing data, right? We talked about in that first slide where they were actually talking about housing costs are up. Well, this would actually lower housing costs, right? We would actually see this. If we actually see more inventory that is available, because we're not seeing constant inflow, right? We're seeing this. They're saying this number is actually going to go down significantly, right? We actually might see it go backwards. Well, then there's going to be less demand for rentals. So we'd actually see that number start coming down. They're also thinking, right, is they're saying that, hey, the areas are probably going to get hit the most: New York, Miami, Houston. Okay, this all makes sense to us, right? And it says where international immigrants moved in 2024. Well, here we are, right? We're this square, we're not this square. This is Wyoming. Here's Colorado. And we're looking at this. We're not seeing a whole lot. Yeah, we did see a little bit. We did see a little bit of an influx. And we're actually seeing some of these issues, right? If anyone saw the latest news, I think it's $1.2 billion deficit. And that has a big piece of it, right? With the spending and the new big beautiful bill and everything else that's going on. There's a lot of impacts on this. But this is where most of the immigration is coming in, whether legal or illegal, right? There is no differentiator on this. This is just international immigration coming to the United States, not babies being born. And here we go. We have Texas, we have Florida, right? This is what this looks like up in the East Coast. They're also saying, hey, if we see this international migration start going backwards, we would actually see the total employment growth and reduce overall US economic activity, which I find interesting because we got to figure that our biggest thing that we are doing right now is housing, right? If we were to look almost anywhere outside of tech, most revenue that's coming in is from housing. Well, they're actually saying that if we have a sharp pullback of immigration, specifically on the southern border, that would put upward pressure on builders' labor cost. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, like, that is the craziest statement that I have seen, is that we're going through and we're saying, so it would actually raise costs for people actually building houses. And then when I look at that, I'm thinking to myself, well, how much would that really actually impact the consumer? Right? If I were to step back and let's look at this logically, right? And we start to think, okay, so now we're saying that there's people, because what this is saying is, if we have this migration going backwards, then the people that are still remaining in the United States are going to charge more for their labor and their skills. The people that are not leaving the United States, we're not having this positive migration where people are constantly looking for work and they're willing to do it for cheaper, because that's what this statement is saying. Then people are going to actually demand more money. Well, let's think about that, right? We talk about a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? Because we're blessed in the United States. We have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And how much could prices really go up per house? $10,000? 20,000? Let's go 30. Let's call it $30,000 over 30 years. And I get that there's interest on that, but we're talking a little bit north of $1,000 extra per year over 12 months, over 30 years, right? Like I find this as a hard statement. It said this is one thing that the analysts should keep in mind, is the international immigration, particularly to the southern border, greatly exceeded pre-pandemic norms. Yeah, because we think about 2019 as more normal, 2020 got weird. And then it said this, even if net immigration were to go flat or slightly negative, they'd still take a while to offset or smooth over the recent surge. And we look at this even with like home prices. Remember, we talk about price appreciation, 4% year over year over year. And then we saw that massive surge where we were hitting 10%. And we're over that trajectory line now. Even with prices slowing down, we're still not even back down to the 4% line. We have surpassed it. So what this is saying is, even if we were to start going backwards, we have brought in so many people into the United States that we have surpassed where we would expect to be if it was more of our normal market pre-2020. And it says this, and actually, guys, it would take a lot longer for us to see actually any impact from anything that's happening on with this anywhere from 100,000 to net negative. They're saying we actually won't even see any residential construction labor market issues for a while, and we're going to have to keep an eye on it. And I know that we have seen news articles recently where they're like, oh, the jobs have slowed down in the construction market because there is this workforce that is non-existent anymore. And these analysts are looking through and they're saying, like, actually, we're not actually seeing a slowdown, and we actually won't see a slowdown for many, many years to come when we're actually getting back on track. So, guys, I thought this was interesting. I really did. I think this was actually the more interesting one because we do look at this and we do talk about 2019 and the inventory that we do have, right? Because everything pre-2019 is our normal market. And so when we think about this, here's your 2019. We do not have more inventory than we did back in 2019. And look at this population surge. Where are these people living? Right? Like, as we're going through and we're looking at this, I think what's also interesting is look how this has kind of slowed down, right? Look at all these other years. All these other years are babies. People having babies, 2021, even though people were locked at home, they weren't having babies. I don't get this, right? Like, we're looking at this thing, no babies. And then we've slowed down. Like, it kicked back up, but we're still at an all-time low here. So most of the population that the United States has right now is from immigration coming in. So we'll watch it. We'll see what happens. But let's kick this over. Let's talk about Logan Motoshami, the lead analyst from Housing Wire. It says housing inventory growth has been slowing down since the last 2 weeks. Cool. People are going back to school. Guys, I think that we saw a slower weekend this week because everyone was just sending their kids, having fun, doing the things before they go back off to school. It says, as mortgage rates have been trending lower. However, last week we saw an actual decline week to week. And again, I think that's accurate. Guys, we are in a very seasonal market that is dictated by summer and winter and the activities that go along with it. It says, what does this mean? Has active inventory peaked? Our new listing data is having its traditional seasonal decline. Okay, cool. This is not news. We expect this. And it says, but active inventory has peaked in recent years in October and November. Are lower mortgage rates to blame? All right, well, we don't know. It says, for now, he believes that a combination of things, however, lower mortgage rates, new listing data declining, and frustrated home sellers taking their homes off the market because they didn't get the price that they wanted. Right? So as we're looking at this thing, okay, cool. Like, we understand this. So now there's going to be less inventory. Less inventory. Probably not in Colorado, but let's go national. Less inventory, lower interest rates. What we'll actually start seeing is your motivated buyers actually be more serious. When we're talking right now to agents that are in production, they're saying that, they actually rather have a motivated buyer because buyers are actually going and looking at houses. They're saying, oh, it doesn't check every checkbox. This might be my forever home. And they're saying, there's so much inventory. Let's just keep looking. This home actually isn't going anywhere. So I actually don't believe that this is a bad thing. So we look at the housing inventory, 24% more than last year. We're still not over 2019. I do think we hit it, guys. I think we do hit this 2019 data here. So we're looking at it, 24% more inventory, which we need. We already looked at the population. Guys, remember, we looked at the population. We have more people in the United States coming in every year, adding on to the population that we have, and we still don't have more inventory than we did in 2019. Again, where's everyone living? So we're looking at this thing, new listings data. Here we are. Again, here's your seasonal decline. This is not anything different. Like, we're seeing this. People are sending their kids back off. They're going off to school. Price cut percentage of properties with recent price reduction. So this number looks a little different than the one that we saw over here on this map. It says 42%. We're going to round up. 42% of all homes. We know, historically speaking, 1/3 of all homes take a price decrease. So as we're going through here, again, I think this is an opportunity for our buyers. We're seeing sellers, and these are the motivated sellers that are saying, hey, I need my home sold. let's drop the price. And again, I think that we need to front load the work now, guys, because we do know that people are raising their hands. The moment that interest rates start to drop and we start to see this, I don't think we're going to see people try to time the market and try to get the second or third rate cut. I actually don't think that's what's going to happen this go around. I think they're going to say, yes, this number I'm comfortable with, this helm, check some check boxes, let's move forward. And we might actually start to see multiple offer situations become more prevalent. We're seeing them now. We are seeing multiple offer situations still in our market. And we talk about these pockets, guys. We see these pockets of different things. That's why we don't know if we're in a seller's market, a buyer's market, a balanced market, because it changes depending on your neighborhood, your zip code, your city, your price point. And so as we're looking at all these different things, we need to be having these conversations. We're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to talk about the spread, but here's your purchase application data. Guys, look at this. This is exciting. And the only reason why we should get sick to our stomach is if we're not having conversations with our people, right? If you think that there is someone in your ecosystem that mentioned, that thought about purchasing a house, that you haven't had a conversation, yeah, you should have a pit in your stomach right now. This should make you sick because they talked to a lender. And if you're not that lender's preferred partner, they're giving it to another real estate agent. I can promise you that. And so this still goes to show us, with interest rates being at an all-time low this year, and we know that there's a potential for them to get lower, and these people are just excited. Guys, this is the difference between now and 2024. Look at this spread that we have here. Your people are talking to lenders. Are you in the mix? Are you in the conversation? Are you on social media? Are you making the phone calls? Are you going out to Topgolf? Are you doing the things to be in emotional proximity with these people? Guys, this data right here is showing us people are talking to lenders. Don't get cut out of the conversation. Your pending sales, seasonality, guys, right? And so 2022, this is weird. And I keep talking about 2022 just because I want you guys to understand, like, as we look at this, interest rates were super low here. And then they started to spike up. And then we started to see less and less inventory, and that's when it fell back in line. But this is still the residual from the craziness of 2021. And then it carried on, and then we saw the big halt. Your weekly sales pending, right in line. Guys, seasonal, right? There's nothing crazy ahead. So here we are, we're in inflation week. All right, this is the big week where we're looking at, we've been looking at this thing in jobless claims. We're not seeing anything crazy. There's no reason why we're going to see a big spike in jobless claims. Or again, we already talked about, like, in our market, in our industry specifically, where would we see the biggest impact of jobless claims? Will it be in the construction data, right? We just saw that. We just saw the immigration, and there's a lot of speculation on where are all the jobs, who's doing the jobs, right? And when we're talking about labor, and we're talking about the piecework, and who's doing the roofing, and who's doing the tiling, and who's doing the framing, and who's doing the painting. And this is where we would actually see the big surge in our industry, is if that just dried up, and it hasn't. Builders have slowed down, but they haven't come to a halt yet. And for all intents and purposes, it's not happening. And keep in mind, right, we've talked about this, the affluency of the people that are purchasing houses, those people don't typically lose their job, right? So when we're looking at this thing and we're talking about the people that lose their job first, they're not the ones that are purchasing real estate. Now, again, we're not going to root for a recession. No one wants to see people lose their jobs. Super anti-American. But again, I need you guys all to understand that people losing their jobs in our industry doesn't necessarily hurt us. It actually helps us. Because what has to happen then to keep the economy going, because now people don't have jobs, they have to release the cost of money. They have to lower the barrier. And so interest rates start going down. The cost of money starts going down so that we can actually flood money back into the market. Because while we talk about real estate and we think about the largest financial decision that most Americans make in their lifetime, buying a $600,000 home, where else do people borrow money? They borrow money to start businesses. They borrow money to expand their businesses, right? They do all these different things with money. And so when we start to see people start losing their jobs and money starts actually coming down, then we actually start to see other businesses start to expand. We start to see the affluent actually start to go out and spend more money. Again, we're not going to cheer for this. We're not going to root for this, but yet that is just what happens when we start looking at these cycles. And let's end it here, guys, because we're talking about the interest rates. Guys, look what this is doing, right? And the only thing that has been happening is data has been coming out. Data. They have been looking at data of what is happening with tariffs. They've been looking at data with jobless claims. They have been looking at data with inflation. The Fed has not cut rates. The Fed has held strong. And yet, if we were to look at this over a month, it's gone down. If we were to look at it over 3 months, it has gone down. Now, these blips, I think, is what kind of worries people a little bit, especially like as we start ticking up here. We've ticked up here. This weird little tick, it actually went down pretty quick. So who knows what happens. But your 6 months, yeah, it's gone up and then it's coming back down. I think, again, this is what kind of worries people. Here's your year data. This is what people are looking at. This is what confuses people. This information in here is what truly confuses our people because they want to time the market. We want to see flat. Flat is good. Flat is good because that's actually what gives people the comfortability to actually go through, put their home on the market, know that it's going to sit for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 30, 60, 90 days, and know when their home eventually gets an offer, they can go find a home for themselves, lock in their rate, and move forward. So what we're looking for at this point, guys, is we're looking for the Fed to actually go through, look at inflation data, move forward, and to make the cost of money more affordable for people to go purchase real